Hello and welcome to Natural Sciences. Today's topic is feeding relationships. Did you know that elephants are proof that eating plants only does not make you lose weight? While you think about that, we are going to swiftly move on to our lesson objectives for today. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain what producers and consumers are. You should be able to differentiate between primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. You should also be able to distinguish between herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Further, you need to be able to explain what food chains and food webs are. And lastly, you need to be able to identify producers and consumers in an ecosystem. So what you are looking at is our concept map, which gives us an idea as to how this lesson is going to go. So the first concept that we are going to tackle today is feeding relationships. So we are going to explain what that is, and then we are going to move on to producers. Then we will talk about consumers and the 4 types of consumers that exist in an ecosystem. And then we are going to speak about food chains and food webs. And lastly, we are going to tackle the issue of trophic levels. For this lesson, you should have an understanding of the interaction between organisms of different species in an ecosystem. You should know the difference between a population and a community. In addition to that, you should have an idea of what food chains and food webs are. And then this topic is going to look at the interaction through feeding relationships between organisms that exist in an ecosystem. So before we jump into the lesson, these are the new terms that you are going to come across during this lesson. So the first term that we are going to see is producers. Producers are plants that have the ability to make their own food. So we refer to them as producers. Then we have consumers. These are organisms that rely on other organisms for energy and food supply. We then have herbivores. Herbivores are animals that feed on plants for energy and food supply. Then we have carnivores, which are organisms that feed on other organisms that are either alive or dead. We then have omnivores, which are animals that feed on both animals and plants. We then have insectivores. Insectivores are carnivores that feed on insects. And then we have scavengers, which are also a type of carnivore, but these ones, they feed on dead animals or decaying meat. We then have a prey, which is an animal that is hunted and eaten by the predator. We also have predators. Predators are organisms that catch, kill, and eat other animals. In addition, we have autotrophs. Autotrophs are organisms that can produce their own food. These are the same as producers. So another term for autotrophs is producers. It's the same thing. And then we move on to heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are organisms that eat other organisms in a food chain. So these are also referred to as consumers. So heterotrophs or consumers. Before we move on to the first concept of our lesson, we are going to go on to an ad break.